Time now for Morning Rounds with CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Jon LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Holly Phillips. First up, walk down any aisle of your local supermarket and you are sure to see lots of products with descriptions of their nutritional value. Now, the FDA says it will reevaluate regulations about these claims, including the definition and use of the word healthy on labels. Holly, why is the FDA reconsidering this?
You know, one of the cool things about this is that it's largely consumer driven. You know, there's even been a citizens petition to get it done. Ultimately, people just want to be able to make really informed decisions about what they're eating. To do that, labels have to be clear, they have to be accurate, and they have to be up to date. When it comes to the term healthy, they are not up to date. So the science of what we define as healthy has completely changed since the early 90s when the FDA first defined the term. Under the current guidelines, you can put theoretically, you could put a healthy label on sugared cereal, something like Frosted Flakes or Pop-Tarts, because they're fortified with nutrients. In the early 90s, we weren't as focused on the sugars. On the flip side, things like salmon, avocado, or even almonds may not be able to carry a healthy label because they have too much fat. In the early 90s, we weren't focused on the good fat versus the bad fat. So a lot has changed.
So there's no baseline for the definition. I falsely believed you had to hit some mark to be able to put that on your packaging.
Right, and the dietary guidelines for Americans, as Holly points out, has changed so much since the 1990s when we just thought, okay, it should just be low in fat. Yeah. They don't mention really anything or much at all about added sugar. And we said, okay, unsaturated fats should be low, but no mention of trans fats, which are now banned. And I think the big takeaway of this is we make this so complicated. You know, how do you have a healthy diet? And really, a lot of the stuff, as we always say, stuff your mother could tell you. You want to have healthy ingredients, so we're leaning more towards plants and towards fruits and things like that. But also, it's a matter of how they are all put together. Yeah. So you can have one thing that is labeled healthy, but if you have that all the time, that's all you have, it becomes an unhealthy diet.
Right. All right. So, Holly, is this reevaluation of these nutritional claims ultimately a good thing for consumers?
You know, Anthony, it's hard to see any downside here. You know, transparency is key right now. And healthy isn't the only term that's being redefined by the FDA. They've said in the coming weeks they will actually put out a formal guideline for what the label natural should be on products. Right now, it's misleading. Sometimes people think if the product says natural, it means there's not artificial flavoring or pesticide or GMOs. And in fact, it means anything, whatever the manufacturer or company wants it to mean. They will change that. Also, trans fats. The FDA finally banned trans fats after years and years of lobbying from advocacy groups. So we're definitely on the right track. The FDA is certainly going in the right direction to give us all more information. It's just a little slow, taking a little bit of time.
Says, eat this, don't eat this.
Right.
There you go. That's the label we all want.
I like your system.
Yes. All right. Well, moving on.
Keep it clear.
It is a condition that's been misunderstood for decades. Irritable bowel syndrome. IBS affects an estimated 10 to 15% of adults and causes a range of painful symptoms. But fewer than half of those sufferers will receive a diagnosis. Jon spoke with Dr. Mark Pimentel, a leading expert from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, about his research in uncovering the roots of IBS.
What exactly is irritable bowel syndrome?
Irritable bowel syndrome is a disease that affects 48 million people, and nobody really knew what it was. I mean, it's associated with symptoms, abdominal discomfort, bloating, changes in bowel patterns that go on for years and years, and until 20 years ago, nobody knew what it was.
People call it IBS, right?
Right.
For short. What did they used to think was the cause?
So 20 years ago, often when doctors don't know the cause of a disease, they often attribute it to stress and anxiety, and it more often happened in women, and so there was this concept that maybe it was anxious women, and all of that is now gone by the wayside, thankfully.
And I remember even at the beginning of my career, it was sort of like, women were patted on the head, it's okay, it's in your head,
right.
And then it turns out it's not in your head, it's in your gut, it's something real. And what exactly is the cause of it now, or as far as we know right now?
Well, what we're starting to understand is that the gut microbiome is affected in IBS.
What is microbiome?
So the microbiome is the collective group of bacteria that are in your gut normally, and they usually reside in the colon or the large intestine. And when they start to overpopulate, go into the small intestine, we call that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. We see that a lot in IBS. And then they get bloated, and then they get changes in bowel function. And so this change in the microbiome, we now think is a major cause of IBS, or at least a large percent of those patients have that.
And so then once you have a diagnosis of IBS, though, now nobody's going to pat you on the head and say, oh, it's all in your head.
Well, the good news is that, for patients who are told it's in their head, and now they sit at home and never see a doctor because they thought it was futile, now it isn't.
And you can see more of Jon's interview with Dr. Pimentel on CBSThisMorning.com. That must be a sigh of relief for people who are undiagnosed.
Absolutely. And I think the takeaway for people who are watching this is there are tens of millions of people who have belly problems. And it can be all sorts of things, bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea, constipation, whatever. And for years, I think people have been misdiagnosed. And there's a good chance if you have one of these symptoms that you really haven't gotten the correct diagnosis. So I would say the take home is don't be sitting at home suffering. There are a lot of different causes. It could be celiac disease, it could be an ulcer, it could be irritable bowel syndrome, it could be parasitic infection. And you really have to go to your general doctor at first. And if that doesn't work, though, this is something where I would say, something, it's changed a lot. There's a lot of new things that we can do. There's a lot of new treatments and diagnoses. So go to a specialist.
I also think, as an internist, it's just so encouraging. I've had so many patients come in, I ask their medical history, and they'll say, I was diagnosed with IBS, but whatever, I know there's nothing you can do about it. And then they start to move on. And it's really empowering now to be able to say, actually, no, there are things we can do about it, and let's explore that more. So it's encouraging.
And the most important thing is the relationship between the doctor and the patient, because unlike a strep throat, where you say you're done, here's the penicillin or whatever, it's about back and forth. What are your symptoms? Keep a symptom diary. What makes it better? What makes it worse? That relationship is so important.
Finally, a cup of coffee is the only way many of us can start our day. But for those trying to curb their Java intake or simply wake up without the help of caffeine, the folks at the popular YouTube channel ASAP Science compiled a list of natural ways to tackle the morning without coffee. Among their suggestions, end your shower with a little cold water, start the day off with a healthy breakfast, get moving and exercise first thing in the morning, and throw on some good tunes and start the day with a little music.
We have a lot of music here. Good way to start the day, right?
Yes, and a good way to end it, too.
Dr. Jon LaPook and Holly Phillips, thank you both so much.